Good morning. This is Talking Devils, your favourite Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Barton, joined as always by Manchester United legend Paul Parker to talk over another difficult week at Manchester United. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Wayne.
Good.
But
What did you get up to over the weekend?
at the weekend, I went and watched a real football match where real decisions, bad decisions by a Premier League referees dropped down a bit and couldn't relate to it. But I was at the home of Millwall on Saturday, and it was a different level of football, but very enjoyable.
Yeah. Feisty encounter against Luton with a bit of history.
Oh, there's history from the mid 80s between those two, and the policing suggested it when I got off that train. I haven't seen, honestly, I thought I'd come at the wrong time into Southeast London. It was just riot police everywhere. Honestly, you would have seen less crash armies at a Hells Angels convention than what you saw there with what amount of police there were there at that stadium.
Well, you look safe and well, so passed without event for you at
Yeah,
least.
yeah,
Good
oh, yeah. I
stuff.
sneaked around the back and got away.
Unfortunately, no such luck with this podcast. You have to confront some difficult things head on. If you're watching live, please like and subscribe on YouTube. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, feel free to get any questions as well. Um, Good grief, Paul. I don't know where to begin with this one. We're back, obviously, to discuss United's loss at Leicester. And if you thought last week's podcast was a little bit more critical than usual, then unfortunately, I can't say that this one's going to be any easier. Even with almost 48 hours to digest the game, some things remain unpalatable. And I had the very nice relief yesterday of my nephew, who was only 6. He's turned 7 next week, and he won his first ever football tournament. So that sort of made up for my poor weekend, to be honest. So well done, Freddie, if you watch this back. But then you have to recount the events of Saturday's game to sort of go into talking about it like we're going to do now. And it does remain unpalatable because, Paul, I don't know where to begin with it because we've talked about games as being the lowest moment since Sir Alex. And I thought um, Ollie had navigated through those difficult waters. We saw a lot of them in his first few months in charge of United. That we saw some really difficult games, and we sort of give him the benefit of the doubt with the fact that he inherited a lot of that. There was a massive mess that he had to sort of deal with. But I mean, we'll talk about the bigger picture in a moment. But let's talk about the game itself. I mean, we went a goal ahead, pretty play before the great shot from Greenwood. But from then on, I mean, I thought we were fortunate to be in the league. The defending throughout the game was just shocking. Maguire obviously not ready. Ollie came out after the game and said he perhaps shouldn't have picked him. He was caught out on more than the occasions that led to the goals. Let's be brutally frank about the game itself. Only De Gea comes out of it with any credit because he sort of kept that score down for a long time. It was a shambles of a performance with some of the worst defending we've seen, especially on set pieces, which is even more concerning. Matic, arguably our best midfield player, or best outfield player, I should say, he's still getting caught on the ball and at times being pulled around by a midfield who just absolutely bossed us. We had an attack that didn't look as though they'd ever played or even trained together before. And then we got to a point where it was 2-2, which would have easily been more than what we deserved from that game. The shambolic nature of the next two goals really summed up a rotten afternoon for us. And Paul, you did tip that Leicester would end the run, the unbeaten run that's lasted for nearly 2 years. We've got to give credit for that, although United have been riding the luck sometimes. But they did end the run emphatically and deservedly so. So you give credit to Leicester for winning, but oh god, there were ways to lose, Paul, and United just they went to words I can't even mention on this podcast. It was really bad.
Yeah, it was bad, but when you do lose an unbeaten run, you do normally find that it's normally lost in a bad way. It's normally a humbling in the end. When you do get beaten, they're very rarely narrow defeats and whatever they are. You do get embarrassed, and United were embarrassed. And to be honest, it's one of those ones, those records, as far as I'm concerned, which was papering over massive cracks.
Yeah,
Great they can go back and say, "Oh, this unbeaten run, it's beaten Arsenal, if I'm right. But then if you look at some of those performances that went with it, it wasn't good. There wasn't many outstanding away performances where you look at it and go, "God, thoroughly deserve that." There was ones which they got back into games by luck more than judgment. And it's not the way to be, in my opinion, that you have this great away record, but a lot of the time you've had to come from behind. And especially when your home form performances and win ratio is poor as well, it's definitely papering over cracks when you're using away record to get yourself out of trouble. So in my opinion, it's quite good that it's gone now. The next bit is the next game that's coming up. That's the most important one. But you look at the weekend and everything that's come out that's been bad about Manchester United all come out in one game up against a team which was having a rotten time defensively and attacking wise, and even in midfield that they haven't been right. Prior to the game, Brendan Rodgers couldn't talk enough about the players that he's got missing. Every excuse in the book was used by Brendan Rodgers. So now everything positive will be said by him by that win they've got. He'll talk about performance. He'll be saying everything. He might come out of it with a knighthood the way he talks. But but always when you do humble Manchester United, people do want to put you on a pedestal, and Brendan Rodgers will be looking for that pedestal after that 4-2 win against a poor Manchester United team. But when I've said before about everything comes into fruition, you look at that defence and everything about it come out. I mean, why he felt it was right to play Maguire, I really don't know. I was shocked, absolutely shocked. Everything he said, it seems like he was trying to play the mind games about him and about the where he was, and even Harry Maguire come out and said something. You think now you look at you think to yourself, you wasn't boxing clever because you wasn't ready for that, and he looked like somebody who wasn't ready. He played very tentatively, and someone like Harry Maguire with his body shape, with his agility, and the way he has to be to play a game of football, he can't afford to go into a game unless he's 100%. As you saw there, the way where he got caught out, it just tells you he cannot play unless his body and his head is 100% right, because he's not that good about it. He's not natural in that sense. He needs to be in that way. And one player who always said that, which I know for a fact is true, Gary Neville. Gary's one of those players. He had to wake up. He had to prepare properly. Everything had to be right for Gary to go into a game. If he wasn't that way, even Gary would put his hands up and say things weren't going to be right for him. I think Maguire's one of them. He has to look how he prepares, and he has to put his hands up and start being honest. And because he's got an armband, doesn't mean he has to play in every single game, even though he might not be 100%. He's got to be there for the team. There's only been one person or maybe two who could maybe have gone and done that United during my time. And that's Brian Robson, maybe Roy Keane. But not Harry Maguire. He hasn't got their ability to go and do that. And it showed at the weekend.
Yeah, Rory Post comment just said, "Morning, gents. Morning, Rory. Hope you're doing well." I think that was it for me. And they both sort of did a mea culpa after. I think Maguire, mentioned that maybe it was a bit of a rush. I'm not sure if I read that, but I think I did. And Ollie obviously did. He came out and sort of said, like, I shouldn't have played him. And it wasn't just on Maguire, though. I mean, as poor as he was, obviously he's got to be probably his worst game for us. When you have a player who's having that kind of stinker, for whatever reason, like obviously he was rushed back from injury, but when you have a player who's playing that poorly, if the team is playing poorly, it can really, one big weakness can get exposed time and time again, as it did against Leicester, especially the shambolic second half. It was just unreal. But the shape again was, I felt a little bit off, Paul. Matic and Pogba, I want to say that it was either Southampton or Wolves they played at. I'm pretty sure it was Wolves in the midfield. They didn't look right then. Wolves were given a lot of chances to score. And really, let's be, again, frank about it. No combination of players that United have at the moment ever looks like dictating a game. I know people are saying that there was a call to put Matic in because he's generally the more composed of the midfielders that we've got, but against a midfield that's as bombastic as Leicester's, you're asking for trouble, aren't you, really? Especially, I mean, that partnership, Matic and Pogba, which hasn't worked since we signed with both of them together.
No, it hasn't worked. And one of the things that they couldn't do between them, and well, not between them, the rest of the team, is keep the ball longer, because it was just allowing Leicester just to break off with them, and the sheer energy levels in that midfield was too much. They couldn't deal with that. And for me, Matic is still a very good midfield, but he has to have the right players around him. And he hasn't been given that opportunity at United. It isn't suddenly about him because of his age and becoming a poor player. It's because of the poor selection, the actual team imbalance, which is making him look the player that he isn't at this moment in time. And you could put him into other midfields in this league, and he would look a better player because they retain the ball better, and he would find people better as well. I mean, when you look at it, he hasn't really got a natural such centre forward to play off, who plays in the manner of a centre forward in that sense. So it's very difficult to get that cohesion between the midfield and the front players. It's been almost impossible defensively to get any cohesion with the midfield because it hasn't been right. The balance is not right. Are the players right? We don't really know. We're never going to know how this is going to really work and fall into place unless maybe things change really off the field, in my opinion, because it's not gonna get any better at this moment in time. If it does get better, it's going to be about huff and puff more than what it should be.
Or a big change that Ollie's not sort of used to doing at the moment. Like one of those. He's going to have to break away, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. That from his sort of the faith that he has in players, he's going to have to make a bold call in that. Obviously, the big counter conversation that's come as a consequence of that defeat is about, again, the pressure that's on Ollie. And he did have that sort of feeling where, and I'm not saying that this is definitely how I feel about this, but there's the general air of discontent that is familiar. And what I'm talking about is that one game that all the post-Fergie managers have had where you wonder if that was it. And by it, again, I'm talking about something more specific or even more general. I don't really know, but I'll get into the point of what I'm saying. I'm not talking about the lot who, people said that he should have been sacked last season. I know the general feeling of apathy from those fans. I'm talking about a game where you can tell that the match-going fans, who still will get behind him no matter what, they begin to lose their faith. I remember for Moyes, we had that calamity of the penalty shootout game against Sunderland in the League Cup, which was one of the worst penalty shootouts ever. And it was like we dragged ourselves back into a game that we were going to lose, and then we lost it in farcical fashion. And it just sort of gave you the impression that nothing was going to turn around. And then, it was still 4 weeks after that when we lost against Olympiacos. And that, for me, was the game where you thought, no, there's something wrong here, that's not going to get better under this manager. In fact, we knew that it was going to get much worse, and as it did when we lost heavily at home to City and Liverpool. And for anyone who watches this or listens back, I want to just say that just a reminder that the last 30 minutes of that Liverpool game were incredible in terms of atmosphere, the fans getting behind the manager. And it's not so much about like thinking that he's going to come good and win. It's about getting behind the team and the manager at that point where he needed it. Under Van Gaal, we were eliminated from the Champions League, and it was obvious that Mourinho was going to come in because he was sacked from Chelsea. And then we lost to Norwich and Stoke just before the Christmas with some of the worst defending I've ever seen at the club. It was obvious we were going to make a change at that point, but we waited until May. And Mourinho, it was more or less obvious from the 3-0 defeat to Spurs, wasn't it, when he put up the 3 fingers and everything. And it could have been 5, it could have been 6, because they were like a knife through butter in that game. And then a few weeks later, we lost 3-1 against West Ham. We put McTominay in defence a couple of months after that. He put McTominay and Matic in defence against Southampton. That was an infamous game where he said Pogba's like a flu, he's like a virus in front of the dressing room. So it was obvious. What I'm saying is there were key moments where you could tell that the tide was turning. And I look at this recent run of games and the idea that in September we were looking at a title challenge, or people were talking about a title challenge, that at the minute obviously looks laughable. And I'm wondering if it is the players or manager that's mostly responsible, but it is, again, it's a line between understanding the size of the job the manager inherited and then that feeling of, is he going to do any better with what he's got? And Paul, I mean, I just want to put a little. I'm not saying that I'm defending Ole because I'm very much on this sort of curve where I'm thinking, no, I don't know if we can at this moment in time. Maybe it's the time for the change. But I do want to put the case there that he still has, let's remember, the best consecutive league finishes of any manager since Fergie in full seasons. He finished third and second. On last week's podcast, we both said they just feel like it's slipping away. We were worried that the job was too big for him. But I do want to say that he surpassed my expectations from when he got the job. And the one thing I would say is that we've had sticky runs of form in the middle of seasons before under Solskjaer. And season on season, he has improved and progressed as a manager. I don't know if people are going to agree with that, but he's definitely progressed the club into a further position than what it was. So that to me says that the current setup at least has experience of riding storms out to come out of it better. Now, I'm not saying that's a guarantee that this is going to get better. I'm just saying he's got experience of things improving. So I don't know if it would be a great move by the club in the middle of a run like this to dismiss him before he's had the chance to turn it around. I don't know, Paul. Where do you stand on that? I mean, we've both been supportive of Ole, but we talk about these landmark games. We do remember the Olympiacos under Moyes. We remember the Stoke and stuff under Van Gaal. You remember the Spurs thing with Mourinho. It sort of did feel like the Leicester game was like that for Ole. One of those big games where you're thinking he's had 3 years and the defending some of the worst we've ever seen. It's a very, very worrying sign.
I look at it on my point of view is I'm looking at these games coming up and they might be able to get through these games. Atalanta, who you look at them, and then you look at Liverpool. Then is Atalanta again? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that correct? And then you're talking about City coming up shortly. I think there's even the Spurs in the mix as well, coming up as well. Not that it's Spurs, we should look at, but you still talk about it. You're playing up against another big game. It's another big game. I think we're saying that they're all big games. United after what happened at the weekend, and
yeah.
I think we have to remember that my big point of when he took over is that he needed someone to come in and pacify a lot of people, not just the players. There was a lot of people in and around that club who were made to feel uncomfortable because of the previous regime and the manner in which they went about doing that job, the amount of people they affected in the wrong way. Manchester United wasn't a great club to be around. The training ground wasn't a nice place to be around. Ollie's come in and got it back to somewhere maybe near to where it was under Sir Alex, which everyone loved. The fact was then as well is that United were winning games. We had a good start, but then it get to the point then when the club, and I've been saying it from day one, and I'll always keep saying it because I've played under for 5 years, Sir Alex, is that his whole thing was about performances. And and then when I get shouted down by people telling me that it's about winning, then my mind says to me, well, if that's your kind of mindset, then you should be going to support maybe a lesser team who are just about winning rather than about performances, because performances give you a mentality that gives you something to aim for and gives you the good vibes to go into your next game without a shadow of a doubt. When you have a big game coming up, that game before is important because you want to win it, but you need that performance as well as winning. You don't want to suddenly not perform well, sneak a win and go into your next game because everyone is on edge, not just the players, everybody. So Sir Alex was going into a big European game, going into a game against Leeds, City, Liverpool, Arsenal, was all about that previous game before you go into the big one. Just being knowing that you're mentally prepared for it, and that is off the back of a good performance and hopefully a win as well. And I look at United and there's no good performances, or there's not many. That's the problem. There's not many. There's nothing there to suggest to me at the moment it's going to get any better. When I look at Sancho, 70 odd million for a lad which no one else was bidding on, and yet he hasn't been given a run. I think he needs maybe a run on the right-hand side, but the problem on the right-hand side is Mason Greenwood is doing reasonably well on that side to a point, scored a great goal at the weekend. You think so, I don't want to change him, but while he's willing to affect other people and swap them about, but he's not given maybe a Sancho to do something better on his more comfortable side on the right. He might be able to then feel more comfortable to go on the outside than what he is on the left, because everything keeps coming in. And I always talk that force people inside, it takes them into the strength defensively, but the game's changed a bit. People don't really want to run around the outside anymore. And then you look at Ronaldo. Ronaldo was throwing at him. I don't know if he went out to get him or it was like a gift. A gift. You can have a player who's done this and done that, who you know, but then as well on the other side of it, when you look at the people who are given a gift, that will keep them quiet for a while. Give them something that will take everything away from us. Are you getting the actual centre forward that Manchester United need at this moment in time? I'm not sure. No, I don't think so. Cavani was just hitting the notes. Now Cavani's not getting a run. So the problem is every time he goes in, he's massively ring rusty. Every time he goes in. So we need to run the games, and he helps that the way they want to play. He helped Fernandes because he knew that he was making those runs. Mason Greenwood and Cavani were just getting an idea of each other, sizing each other up. Then you think yourself, Sancho would come into that. That might have made a difference for him, that different kind of movement, rather than somebody who's reasonably static. In the sense of Ronaldo, who's dropping deep into midfield when you want him to be a centre forward. That's what he's become now, centre forward. Don't drop him to become a central midfield player. So the worrying. So two things really have got to change. Really, is that Ollie's got to maybe look to reconstruct what he's got next to him on the bench. Look at that situation and get more experience in to help him. Or there has to be a change up top, to be perfectly honest, with Ollie, because it's going to be now, while there's still an opportunity for things to improve, especially with January coming up as well, to let quite a few go, to bring in maybe personnel in that middle of the park who could maybe just tighten things up in there and add some cohesion in there, familiarity with each other of what they're going to do next, or they carry on as they are and hope that maybe he can get a Champions League spot again, and then everyone can then start talking about, well, we're in the Champions League again, and no league title, maybe get to a final and might win.
Yeah,
because there has to be a point where there must be a point where you think yourself chugging along doing the same thing all the time, and that's not Manchester United's way. People talking every time you speak to people. Everyone goes, after watching that Liverpool Man City game, we can see that those two teams are too far away from Manchester United for them to get anywhere near winning the league. And it doesn't matter if United go strong, nick a draw against Liverpool or beat Liverpool. At the end of the day, when you look over a season, Liverpool are going to win more games than Manchester United.
Yeah, no, it's brutally honest, and can't disagree with anything that you said. I'll add a couple of things onto it from my point of view. Patrick says, just to bridge the gap here, I'm concerned with Ole and coaching staff, how certain things are repeated without ever being fixed. Poor possession play, no midfield dominance, set pieces, lack of structure and shape, soft centre mentally. I mean, they brought in a set piece coach. We don't know, obviously it wasn't working at the weekend, but they brought someone in to at least try and address that.
Wayne, let me just say this bit here. I sound like an old man, but when I was at United, we had first team coach Brian Kidd, we had a manager Sir Alex, we had a physio. We had a physio. we had a kit manager. Then we had an assistant physio, and that kind of sat on the bench, and we worked. And if things weren't right, set piece wise, Brian Kidd would come in, and Brian Kidd would sort that out. The boss will have his opinion. Brian Kidd will set it up, and then we'll go through it. You didn't just suddenly bring in one person. So what did he do? His coaching badges just on set pieces.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is English football. It's not American football where you have an individual for every little thing and have 1,000 people wearing tracksuits with nice boots who turn up and look at everybody. You don't need that many people. You don't see 10 people in the kitchen to make a casserole.
No,
why have they got why? I totally don't. I don't agree with it. What do you need? And all of a sudden now, everyone now is talking about, oh, they brought a set piece coach and he's doing a good job. And to really sum it all up, really, I could not believe, this hit me late, is that they flew 100 miles in an airplane. That doesn't help. Wow, incredible. Manchester United fly to Leicester.
It was a couple of weeks after the Green game, wasn't it? Was it Chelsea Spurs? They made a big fuss about it being the carbon neutral, and then we go and counterbalance it with it.
I know that's a little bit off scale, but that was in my head. That was bugging me. I could not believe that this didn't help. Nothing. It just didn't help the situation. Hasn't helped the situation to go and do something like that. They spent more time in an airport and on mostly there on everything around that than what they mostly would have done if they sat in a bit of traffic.
Yeah. To Patrick's point about the midfield, obviously it's a point we've laboured on many, many times. I don't think that something that obvious is missed by the club. I just think that there was a list of emergencies, and we've talked about them over the years, and it just so happened that this year's was a defensive emergency and a midfield one. We had the money to buy the defender, and we got a great defender. Varane still settling in, and it looks pretty good when he has played. Then there's the argument, was Sancho necessary, or do you go in and get a midfielder? I mean, these are the decisions basically of what Ole's reign is going to be judged upon. I just think that's the other thing as well. You mentioned it earlier, and I do want to come out and reiterate that one of my biggest concerns about making big changes is that there's been a massive infrastructure overall at the club, and they've invested so much in the new staff, in the new scouting system, the new youngsters, all of this under this setup with this way of thinking. And we have become stable, and you have a risk of throwing away stability, just as you do with any change of manager. I'm not talking about the first team results here, because it's not indefinite, and you don't stay on a sinking ship just because it's friendlier than the last one. And Ole and all the staff will know that. The problem is that when you make these big changes, you do risk losing the good that you've built. And I do wonder, and it's this point that I keep coming back to, Paul, I wonder, and we'll get on to the structure of the side now, if Ole's been too trusting in giving the players too much time to prove themselves, because he played Martial against Everton, and fair enough, he came in and scored, but he's not in the side for the next game. And no one's batting an eyelid, because he probably shouldn't be in the squad. But why play him against Everton? Play Sancho there. Give him that chance. And I wonder if now we're at that point where, well, I said it last week on the pod, that we are at that point where these decisions are defining his reign, because I keep going back to when he first got the job and the players were proving themselves to him and to the club. He showed himself to be quite tactically adept. He used a number of different positional shapes and everything like that. He was very good with his formations, changing it up in games as well. And I think he has to go back to those basics and sort of say, look, do you know what? I did trust you. I've given you the trust, but my job's on the line now, and I need to go back to trying to win games. And the case in point, as always, is Paul Pogba. And he came out after the game and he talked about how it wasn't good enough. He said similar things before under Mourinho in Mourinho's last season. I don't see how Pogba's helped this situation at all. All right, he's played well, but Ole's catered to his every whim to make sure that he played well. He's played him in multiple positions that have resulted in the imbalance of the team just to have Pogba in. And don't get me wrong, he's played well in some of those games. And because of Ole pandering to him, he's played his best football for the club, but he's still not been regularly enough. He's had this contract in front of him for more than a year. And he's not only not signed it, which is his right to do, by the way. He doesn't have to sign a new contract, but his agent still comes out and talks about it, often before big games, and creates a lot of noise, unnecessary noise and pressure. Now, all he's talking about tough decisions, what he's going to make. He actually said something along those lines. He's going to have to start making tough decisions. But we're in a position where he's not protecting an asset anymore because Pogba's going to be able to sign for another club in 6 weeks for nothing. So there's no wisdom. I don't think there's any wisdom because he doesn't seem to have any intention of signing a new deal because it would have been signed by now. Why throw a Sanchez type deal at him? That's going to be the last bad decision that you make. You know, I would say for whatever time he's got left, look at that midfield dilemma he's got and look for a solution that doesn't include Pogba and maybe includes some form of reshaping in the side. You know what I mean? And like, sort of do away with this 4-2-3-1. It's all right talking about protection, but we said it against Villa and we said it against Everton. The protection isn't protecting, so there's no point having it anymore. You said about Ronaldo. I just want to make a quick point on that. That, you know, obviously he's not a pressing forward, but he was scoring goals when he first came into the side. Cavani in the team. And I wonder, you know, obviously Cavani is a player who's going to chase around and he's going to press from the front. And I wonder if you restructure the side to have both of them in and have Fernandes as one of two in midfield. Now, I'm not excusing Ronaldo because, I'm having a few concerns about him, whether or not he's the cherry when you don't have a cake. But one of United's issues is that all of the forwards are selfish players. None of them are creative players. You don't have a crosser in there, apart from, I mean, Cavani I've mentioned as someone who will do selfless running, but who else is crossing in there? Who else is creating the chances? The only thing I can think of with the setup that we've got with Cavani and with Ronaldo, knowing that you've got to play Ronaldo, you're not going to play one of the greatest ever. You're still going to play games. And I wonder if you look at a player like Greenwood and you play a player like Rashford, and I know that people are going to say, oh, they both scored at the weekend. But maybe you look at Lingard and ask Sancho to do a little bit of this donkey work. And maybe getting busy players like Lingard and Cavani in there, not necessarily creative, but we don't have the crosses in the front line, that you have them in there to make the space, you know what I mean, to create the space and create a little bit of havoc in there. Maybe that can be the sort of impacts that we need in the front line in the coming games. I don't know if Sancho will do that kind of work. I don't know if that's another change that's too massively unnecessary. Do you know what I mean? If you just work at fixing the midfield. But I think, Paul, because of the Ronaldo signing, it's given him this headache, hasn't it? That he's like, now he's got an extra headache. He's basically got 3 headaches in the side. He's lucky that De Gea's in form because that could have easily been 4 positional headaches that he's got.
Yeah, well, the De Gea one, he's got away quite lightly because of the Henderson situation at the start of the season. De Gea has come in. Henderson's not getting a mention now, is he? You know, and there was a majority of United fans who wanted De Gea out. And even I always turn around and say, I always thought myself, he's a better goalkeeper. So we've seen that situation already. Given the current climate, he's the one to have in goal because of the fact of De Gea's experience and that experience over the years and that international experience is far greater needed at this moment in time than Henderson, who had the only experience of playing championship football. Completely different scenario from that point of view. I look at the Ronaldo one, I just think that was something that was, Ollie didn't need that this season. He really didn't need everything. And I think he's found out what happened against Everton. And then obviously the situation with Sir Alex, who people have said to me, oh, we shouldn't be saying things like that, Sir Alex. He actually wasn't saying it out there for public consumption, to be perfectly honest. It wasn't. He just said something generally as somebody who had an opinion. He's been a manager and just had an opinion. And it's one, but I think it's justified because even I said it. You don't leave him on the bench. The best thing he could have done with Ronaldo, you don't have him on the bench. If you're not going to start him, don't have him on the bench because you know that cameras are going to be panning every 2 minutes to him when things don't go right. The director in the gallery. He's going to go and see if Ronaldo's saying anything, see if there's any action. Look for that. Look to see if he's trying to coach on the bench. So Ole put himself in a situation he should never have done. Common sense for me says play him. At some point, he's going to need a rest, and you can do that off the back of how many games you play him, and you can see it. He might have to start, to be honest, but you could have not put yourself in that position. I think if he had initially actually come out and started him, there wouldn't have been a problem. I think we would have seen a better performance against Everton. But I think by doing that, it affected everybody. In fact, the level of the fans supporting that stadium as well, wonder what's going on here. So a lot of players were put under pressure. But I look at the Sancho one, now that Rashford is now fit, Ole's going to be forced to play Marcus Rashford. Everything says that he's going to be forced to play him, in the sense of politically, he's going to be forced to play him to have him. Because if I'm Sancho, I think myself, right, I've gone in there. It's a poor performance. Rashford's come in, he scored. That's taken me back and I've gone back another step now. I've signed here and I've gone back another step. It's a Champions League game. I'm not going to be starting where I would have been starting for Dortmund in the Champions League game. Dortmund are a better Champions League team of late than what Manchester United have been, but yet I'm not starting, and he's wondering himself, what have I gone and done? You know, he's getting a point in the moment. He's becoming the new Van der Beek at this moment in time. He's mostly wondering, like, a bit like that. It's the worst thing could happen. And there's a picture of those two chatting together at the moment in time. So it's just, there's too many little scenarios which are happening, which shouldn't be happening to a club of that level that's going on. And he's building everything up into, it's going to end up, steam's going to be coming out somewhere, and I just don't know where it's going to be released. But there's too many little plots just starting. For me, Cavani should be starting. He earned the right of what he'd done last season. You look at him, Fernandes earned the right, without a doubt. Cavani's coming, and when he's coming, he earned the right to start the season. But everyone forgot about him because of Ronaldo. But the team was better because of Cavani. Look how many late goals he scored. Even when he came off the bench and he started playing, his movement caused problems. At the moment, there's no movement in that front line. It may be in wider areas, but if then he thinks of, right, okay, deal with that in the wider areas, what's happening in the middle? And then virtually what you've got is a modern day 6 foot odd centre forward who's got incredible experience at top level football, scored more goals than anybody else, but his movement is not going to be maybe as sharp as what a Cavani is. So at the moment, United are quite static from the front line. Is he going to close? Is he going to close down like anybody else? No, that's not part and parcel of this game. When he was at Real Madrid playing that role, he started to play that role. And then when he went to Juve, was he doing that? No, he wasn't. The team worked around his weaknesses to then build towards his strength. And the problem is his strength is to get the ball in the box. And there's no one who's going to do that. They haven't got anybody to do that off that side. We look at Mason Greenwood. Mason Greenwood is always going to step in off it and hit the ball in with his left foot more than his right. And sometimes you just want the cross coming in either side, really. Sometimes it's great to get a cross. Ronaldo wants the crosses maybe coming from the byline, coming back away from goal for him to go and attack. We've seen centre forwards over the years. We've seen Ronaldo score them. Balls coming in. We only call great balls inverted balls coming in off either side. We only call them great balls when someone gets at the end of them. Otherwise, they're called, it's easy for the goalkeeper. Yeah. Because they're swinging in that way.
Yeah.
So
Rory says that. Rory says that. He goes, Sancho is a crosser. He needs to play on the right. But it's what we said earlier in the pod. You know, you're in this situation where you've signed a player, and even the players around him. I mean, they were all buzzing that Ronaldo signed, but play. Even if you've got to adapt your game, then, because Ronaldo's still brilliant. He's not just a shell of a player, a shell of his former self. You can see that he can make a difference. But if you're not, you can't expect him to do it by himself. And those players, if they're not adapting their own game, they first of all, they're letting themselves down because they need to do that. Something needs to change. And even if Ronaldo's not there, something needs to change from those players to be better than what they are. They can't just exist and say that what they are is good enough, because it clearly hasn't been good enough. They need to change. I mean, that's the kind of situation that Martial's found himself in. And all the other players are in the same boat. They've just got more time to basically have what Martial had. They have that chance, do you know what I mean, to sort of put themselves right. And I think another thing, well, I'm not saying this in defence of the manager, but when you're 2 months into that kind of issue, and it's a handful of games, really, you don't sack him without giving him the chance to resolve it. And at least in the past, he has resolved situations. Mike Venkman on Twitter asks this question. He says, Ollie's got some great results against big teams by playing compact and taking chances on the break. Can he do that with the current players now that he's added the likes of Ronaldo and Sancho, who aren't known for tracking back? And that's a good question, Paul. Does he look at these games coming up, the City and the Liverpool game, and does he think what I had before worked against these guys, and I'm probably better off not playing the new ones that I brought in?
Yeah, I think I can see that. Yeah, that point of view, great. So, Champions League game, they do well. Liverpool game, they do well. Man City, they do well. All the big games coming up. The problem is, what about the other games?
Yeah.
What do you do in the other games? They're the ones that win your league titles. So it's all well and good not being beat by Liverpool. In fact, season's great. Gone unbeaten against Liverpool and City, fantastic. But haven't finished in the Champions League spot because couldn't go to Leicester and at least take a point at Leicester. Couldn't beat Everton at home.
Yeah.
What do you do? The players have got to be more rounded. Surely, is that where we're getting to now? Where it's FIFA football, where football's got an identification. Virtually, I can't put up the acronyms of what you can put around it, but kind of don't play him in tough games, not mentally strong. Play him, not a good footballer, but he works hard against Liverpool, Man City in Champions League games. Is that what we're going to do now? Have a squad of 45 players. And then you just put them in there for games, and everyone goes, wow, he's played 6 games, he's tired. Don't play him in that one, he's tired because he's had 6 games this season.
No,
it's amazing, isn't it? That's more money means that you play less games of football. I should have waited 20 years. It's madness.
Well, neither of us are playing any at the minute.
Yeah. And by the way, to everyone, I was being quite cynical with that. By the way, that's what I just said myself about it. But no, that doesn't work for me. If you can't ask players, you think, and I hate saying this, but you think what they're earning, and then you think how much they've cost you. Someone like Sancho, you're asking him to do a little bit more. Someone's cost over 70 million, and you're paying him X amount, and you're virtually saying, well, it doesn't suit him because he ain't gonna run, doesn't really want to track back. Well, shouldn't you know that? Shouldn't you know that anyway? That you're signing. Well, don't go and pay all that money for him if he can't do that bit, which is fundamental of the fact of being in a team sport, that you work hard for your team when you haven't got the ball, or with the ball, you work just as hard and maybe that bit harder because the concentration levels have to be higher when you've got the ball. Then you don't really want them. Surely you take Ronaldo to a point because of he's done it, he's lived it. Sancho is still learning the game. He's a young boy, and Ollie's gone and spent 70 odd million on someone who's still very, very inexperienced in that sense.
Yeah.
And it's showing now. It might be showing to the point of the reason why Man City were content to let him go to Dortmund. So who's come out winning at the moment? If you're Man City and you're looking there, you go to them, you look what you've got in those areas, and you're trying to say, well, okay, we've done a bit better, but United have gone and spent 70 plus on somebody we let go.
Yeah, I think if anyone's listening or watching this and thinking that maybe Paul was being a little bit harsh on Sancho, I would say that this is a product of numerous conversations. And if Sancho was playing all the time, I bet your conversation would be a little bit different. It would be give him time to settle, but he's not getting that. Do you know what I mean? He's not getting the games, and that's the concern. Like you said before, and like we'll continue to say until it changes, it does starting to feel like a Van der Beek situation, which is concerning considering the length of time we were chasing him, and the gaping wound on the right hand side of the team, which he was meant to come in and fix, and that delivery, which Patrick again brings up a great point about crossing from Paul and Rory. Do the coaching staff instruct the inverted wingers to cross the ball, or the cross is supposed to come from fullbacks? If so, it's not working. It certainly isn't. I mean, Luke Shaw was crossing, but he's, I think he's got a little bit carried away with himself. Aaron Wan-Bissaka, we know, I think his crossing came on at the back end of last season, but he's taken a step back, and we need him to come in from somewhere, don't we? And maybe having Sancho on the right. And like I said before, if we don't have crosses of the ball, which we don't tend to have, then create the spaces with movement, which Lingard and Sancho might well do more than what a Rashford or a Greenwood will do, because they're the selfish players who will stop to find space for themselves rather than other players. I'm not criticising them; they're very good players at doing that. But when the system calls for a change, maybe that's one that could be looked at. I don't know. And again, what do I know? They both scored at the weekend, so maybe I'm getting a bit carried away. Let's talk about the upcoming games then, Paul. Atalanta, you've talked about, you do stress this often, and I'm completely with you, the need for a good performance. It's maybe worse for us then that it's at home. They've got a great unbeaten record away this season. United have got a lot of pressure to put on a good show before the Liverpool game, haven't they? And to get the win, because they've got two big away games that are going to be coming up against Villarreal and Atalanta, so they need this one to be a win. And like you said, a good performance.
They certainly do up against the side. I think they're sitting in the European spot at the moment. They're unbeaten away from home as well in their domestic league. So that says a little bit about them. They're reasonably quite, you can see them being quite solid, and seeing the way that Villarreal absolutely cut through the midfield on every occasion. And I think I said it before, at one point they were going backwards through the midfield back towards their own goal to come through it again, because they just wanted to try something different the other side. I mean, they were absolutely just taking the rise in the end, the way they were playing through that midfield. And they should have really killed the game off Villarreal. There was no reason why they should have lost that game. But in the end, you don't know who to blame on that one, Emery, or to blame the players, and why Villarreal come away from Old Trafford. No. But when you look at Atalanta, they're going to be a little bit more sturdier than what Villarreal are. They're not going to be extravagant, maybe, as what Villarreal were when they come to Old Trafford. So it's going to be very, very difficult. The one thing you do know is that they're going to have quite a lot of the ball. And you know that Manchester United midfield is not. So it's going to be more about counter rather than actually anything of any great structure. Because we know that they haven't got that. They haven't got the platform at the Premier League level. And the Champions League level, you have to earn the right to have that. So it took Sir Alex a number of years to build a team to go and compete in the Champions League as he wanted to. Took time, initially going from the three-player rule and the foreigner rule, and then being able to then go and build. But it took him a while to get there. Ole ain't going to suddenly get there just at one game at home. And that game against Villarreal shows that they are quite a way away from a team that's going to compete properly in the Champions League. So he needs something to go into those two away games. He can't afford to get beaten at home against Villarreal, especially with the game coming up after as well. So he's really this is the time, I think you just mentioned it as well, where a good performance and a result is seriously needed to give everyone that really good feel factor going into that game at the weekend, because it is a big, big game. I know they're all big, big games, and even, and Liverpool doesn't get any bigger than Manchester United. But at this moment in time, they really do need something. And if it's about lifting the fans and the fans coming into that stadium and believing they can beat Liverpool, it's more important that the players believe it as well, that they can beat Liverpool. And a good performance can do that. That's what's needed from them, a really good performance, for them to believe that they can. It's no point in the fans believing it, because the fans can't make it happen. All they can do is try. It's the players who need it most.
Yeah, and that brings on to Liverpool then. Liverpool flying at the moment, absolutely. destroyed Watford. Although Watford were there, I mean, they just laid down basically. I'm not discounting how good Liverpool are playing at the moment. They've got all the big hitters playing well. It's ominous for United. You would say that in times gone by that those kind of situations elevate the United players, much like the 1980s tended to do. But there are also sometimes the games that come around and you think, no, do you know what? We're going to get a hide in here. I remember the David Moyes one vividly. And even last season, we made a few changes, and you knew that Liverpool were going to, and they did, just took us to clean as Old Trafford, which is embarrassing. It's again, we're at that point where we're saying about Ole, it's that make or break period where you can't be sure that he's going to make, but another bad result and another poor performance it's just stacking up, and it would make it difficult for him for us to see that he can turn it into a winning position from here. But how do you see that, Paul? Are you a bit concerned considering the way Liverpool play?
Yeah, it's going to be. Yeah, it is a concern, but this is the kind of game where, and to be honest, when you mention the 80s, I've been watching a lot of that recently on TV. The big match revisited, and some of those performances and those games have been absolutely incredible. And you look at, and you're watching that, I'm watching that, and I think I've done almost a whole season of the 79-81. I'm trying to think, FA Cup was Liverpool, and Liverpool won the league as well in 80. But I think it was a Jimmy Greenough. Jimmy Greenough scored the winner, didn't he? At Old Trafford that season. Yeah, Jimmy Greenough scored the winner in that one. And you'd have seen the fight and what they had to do. But Liverpool, the way they played was still playing that same fashion to what they try and play a little bit now. But the one thing I did notice is that their team hardly changed throughout that season. With a few little injuries, but you say seven out of maybe the 11 players played almost every single game with only one sub, generally David Fairclough or Avi Cohen.
Yeah.
Dave Johnson was playing up front, and it's just but the fight was incredible, which they had, and it might be that at the weekend, and I think the fans will accept that, not to get beaten, and they'll accept the fight and blood and guts. So we'll see Fred and McTominay back, and all that will come back into it. But I think you have to look at the long game, and for the long game, it's not good to be in that position.
No.
It's not what you want, because the game that comes after that, you expect them to go out and go, right, okay, it's not Liverpool, it's not, and control the game, but that's not going to happen. So you want more. The long game is that you want them to be competing with Liverpool, and that's all I want. I want them to match Liverpool in the way they play football. More importantly than actually just going there and blood and thunder and who can kick who and who can do this. That's got to be more what Manchester United want. I'm sure more the fans want that as well. They'll take blood and guts and honesty, but I think somewhere you've got to be looking. To look at who you're playing against and say, I'm going to be better than you as a footballer, as I'm going to destroy what you're going to try and do, then I'm going to try and create against you, rather than just accepting destroying everywhere and maybe getting a draw or maybe nicking it by one goal. And then all of a sudden everyone then goes, that will do, and then they forget that it should be more important for United to beat Liverpool, and everyone says how well they played, they deserve to win. And now they're looking like a side that could win the league. That's what my idea of coming out of it as Manchester United.
No, you're absolutely right. I cannot agree more with what you said there. I think if we go back, I don't want to arc onto the Mourinho thing, but the Mourinho, his 3 visits to Anfield, but 2 of them were 0-0s, and he got a lot of criticism for the way they set up in that. The third one was obviously his last game. I know this one isn't at Anfield, it's at Old Trafford, but it was the same kind of principle in the home games as well, like stifle them. And I'm not saying that Ole's been any better than that, but that's the grating thing, is that we're 3 years into a reign and we're still hoping for that kind of performance, knowing that that's going to be the best kind of thing that's going to get as a result out of the game, rather than wanting to play them off the park. And after 3 years, we should be expecting to be able to do that. Especially with the investment that Ole's had and the backing that he's had. the players that he's got at his disposal. We should be able. I mean, not necessarily the players that he's got at his disposal, because we all know what that midfield can and can't do. So you already automatically know that you're not going to be able to play them off the park because you don't have the midfielders to be able to do it. And that's the problem, really, is that you're 3 years into this and you want him to see something that they're not capable of, and that's where the progress needs to come. But again, knowing and understanding it's not going to come on Sunday because the players aren't, they're just not in the position to be able to do that. But we've got to be able to sort of push through to January and sort of see if like one midfielder can magically change a million things. Like let's put it on record, Fernandes magically changed a lot of things in that front line just by adding that sort of pressing urgency. He changed a lot of things. You never know what one midfielder might do for other players around him. But until that point, we're stuck with what we've got. And yet, like Paul said, hoping for something that you don't want to see from United, but knowing that it's the best chance that they've got of getting something out of the game on Sunday. So we'll be back to talk about that next week, and it's going to be an experience either way. So if you enjoyed the podcast, please give us a nice review or rating on Apple Podcasts. If you watch it on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We will be back next week. Stay safe, stay well, and thanks for listening and watching.